everyone, and welcome to the OklaRoots YouTube channel. In today's tutorial, we're going to go over the Teloujay crossbody bag from Country Cow Designs. So this is the crossbody bag, and it is so adorable. It's a really popular bag. I've seen a ton of people making it all over social media. It's a beautiful design. It has this beautiful little accent slip pocket on the front, which is perfect for a panel or an embroidery design, something you really want to highlight. That has an optional magnetic clasp on it. And then when you open it up, it's just a basic slip pocket. On the top, we have a magnetic closure. And when you open that up, you have a zip pocket. I don't know if you can see this, but inside the zip pocket, there are credit card slots, which I think is such a fun and neat way to make a bag. This is a perfect bag if you don't want to carry a wallet. This is a great bag to carry around. You can just put your driver's license, your credit cards, gift cards, whatever you need in that little secret pocket, and then the rest of the stuff in the main compartment of the bag. But this is also just a great size for an everyday bag. You can see it also has an adjustable crossbody strap, and this strap is so cute. It's two-toned, which means we have the fabric on one side, and then we have some accent fabric on the other side. For this bag specifically, I used quilt cotton for the entire bottom, faux leather vinyl on the top, and then waterproof canvas on the interior and also on the strap. So this pattern actually comes in two sizes. This is the smaller size. I went ahead and made the larger size as well, and it's really just longer, and it's adorable. You can see on this one, I used this incredible little Santa embroidery design. I'll have a link for the tutorial on how I made this Santa design down in the description of this video. This is from So Inspired by Bonnie. It's a beautiful pattern. Check the description. All the information will be down there. So you can see on this one, I used vinyl on the bottom, vinyl on the top, quilt cotton for the lining. And then I also like to use a fun little print right here, just kind of pop out. This is a lining cut, but I switch it up since you can see it on the exterior. I like to use something a little bit more fun. And to be honest, on this bag, one of my favorite things is the strap. I used waterproof canvas on one side, that white waterproof canvas, and then I used that really fun Christmas print. I'll have a link for where I got this fabric down in the description of this video, but this is just such a fun Christmassy bag. So let's look at them side by side. So you can see the large size is just taller, but other than that, they're the same. So there's not a whole lot of difference. The pattern pieces are really great because all you have to do is fold on the dashed line in the pattern piece if you want to make the bag a smaller version. Otherwise, just leave it full size and it'll make the larger version. So thank you so much to Jo over at Country Cow Designs for sending me this pattern and allowing me to film this tutorial today. This is a really fun one. She has so many other incredible patterns. Make sure you check out her website. I'll have a link, obviously, for the pattern and her website, everything down in the description of this video. If you're new to the channel, please consider clicking subscribe down below. If at any point you like this video, please give it a like. Any questions, comments, anything at all you want to say, leave them down in the comment section. At the top of the comment section will be a comment from me, and it will have timestamps for every single step of this tutorial. So if there's only one part of the pattern you're interested in, go find it down in that comment, click on the timestamp, and it will take you straight there in the video. All right, let's get started. Time out. Just remembered, you guys probably want to see what the crossbody looks like on. So let's do the small one first. The small version is the one we're going to be making in the video today. I typically wear my crossbodies across my body. So it hangs just like this. Very nice, very flattering. I like the 1-inch strap. It's a perfect strap size. It's not too bulky. It's not so small that it's gonna kind of cut into your shoulders. So that was a small one. So now let's try the larger size. So with the larger size, I would actually hike it up just a little bit higher since it is so long. But this is what it looks like. Again, hangs really nice. Personally, I like the smaller size, but I know a lot of people who would prefer this larger size. So this is a great gift idea. All right, back to the tutorial. So for this bag, you're gonna need a 1/2 yard of exterior fabric and a 1/4 yard of feature fabric. The exterior fabric is gonna be for that front pocket and then the bottom of the back of the bag, and the feature fabric is for that top strip. I like to use vinyl on that top strip, and I will be using quilt cotton for the rest of the exterior. From the lining, you're gonna want 3/4 yard. For my lining, I'm mixing it up just a little bit. For that front little peekaboo on the front pocket, you know where the lining shows through that front slip pocket, I'm gonna use this beautiful little feature fabric right here. I'm also gonna use this quilt cotton for the card slots on the inside of the bag and for the strap. For the rest of the lining and for the other part of the strap, I will be using waterproof canvas. I really like waterproof canvas because I don't have to interface this with anything. There are a few pieces in today's pattern and there's quite a bit of interfacing if you're using quilt cotton for the lining. Waterproof canvas is honestly just quick and easy to use, and it works really well for the interior of bags. You're gonna need 1 1/4 yard of medium weight interfacing. I'll be using woven fuse from Got Interfacing. I love this. This is pretty much going on every single piece of quilt cotton in the bag today. The pattern also calls for 1/2 yard of sew-in foam. Now I did use foam in the last 2 bags that I showed you at the beginning of the video, but today I'm actually going to try out fusible fleece. Fusible fleece is a lot thinner than foam. It can sometimes be easier to work with, sometimes not. So we're just going to try it out. We're just going to see what it looks like with fusible fleece today. So this pattern has a lot of rivets in it. You don't have to use rivets, but it does make it easier and quicker if you do. So I have my Cam Snaps rivet press here. I also have my little 9mm rivets from Emmeline Bags. With the press, I have my 2.5mm hole punch dies and my 10mm double cap rivet dies. If you don't have the hole punch die, you could use a tool like this to punch the holes. You're gonna also need a 7-inch zipper, 9 inches if you're using zipper tape. Don't forget to have a zipper pull if you are using tape. Cam Snaps very graciously sent me over these magnetic snap rivets as well as the press that goes with them. These are size 18mm, so I'm really excited to play with this today. You're gonna need 2 1-inch swivel hooks, 1 1-inch slider, 2 1-inch D-rings. I have these fun little triangle rings, so I'm going to use those today. And then if you have a label for your bag, make sure you grab that and we'll include that during the tutorial. So here's a bunch of other stuff that might be helpful today. I always have this Beacon 3-in-1 glue, especially when I'm working with fusible fleece. It's just such an easy way to attach interfacing when you can't fuse it. I'll be using my Microtex 8012 needles. If you're using foam, you're going to be ripping apart basting stitches quite a bit towards the end of the construction. This is a little seam ripper that looks pretty scary, honestly. To be completely honest, I don't mind using it, but you will find a lot of people who either love it or hate it because it can be dangerous. So it's always good to have another seam ripper on hand. This one's also a stiletto and seam ripper. I always have 2 marking tools, a white chalk pencil for marking on dark fabric, an air erasing marker for marking on light fabric. Make sure you have a healthy supply of clips and pins. This double-sided Dritz tape is perfect for installing the zipper inside the lining. I always have a little 1-inch by 6-inch ruler, and my fabric scissors are Kai fabric scissors. So the only pieces of the bag where there are not pattern pieces are for the straps. You're gonna need 2 of your quilt cotton straps. Each of these should be interfaced with your woven interfacing, and then 2 of your vinyl or waterproof canvas or whatever contrast you're using for your strap. I actually cut them both at the same length, so I cut them both at 32 inches long. From pattern piece A, you're gonna need an exterior cut of fabric and 1 lining cut of fabric. Now this lining cut of fabric will be seen on the front of the bag on the exterior, so I like to use something a little bit more fun for that. Both of these are quilt cotton and they're both interfaced with woven fuse. Pattern piece B is going to be that front slip pocket, so I have 1 exterior cut and then a lining cut, and this is my waterproof canvas. I also wanted to show you the pattern pieces. You can see that I'm making the smaller bag today. If I unfold it, there's a dashed line right here. You can cut on that line or you can do like I do and just fold down that line to make the smaller version. If you're making the larger version, just unfold it or don't fold it and cut like that. Pattern piece C is going to be the strap tabs. These are going to be on the top of the bag and it holds the strap. I do suggest you use something a little bit more heavy duty for this. Don't just use quilt cotton. If you are using quilt cotton, make sure you interface it well. I'm using waterproof canvas, but vinyl or cork is another great option. Pattern piece D is the base of the bag, and I do like to use vinyl or waterproof canvas, something a little bit more durable for the bottom of the bag since it can be set on tables and floors. You're going to want a cut of exterior fabric for that and also a cut of foam or fusible fleece. Pattern piece E are the 2 top panels, these little accent panels on the bag. Both of these are vinyl. If you're using quilt cotton for any of these pieces, make sure you interface it with your woven interfacing. Pattern piece F is for the lining panels of the bag. You're going to need 2 cuts of this. I am using that waterproof canvas, so I do not have this interfaced. If you're using quilt cotton, make sure you interface it with your woven interfacing. Pattern piece G is this nice long piece, and this is going to be for the card slots that are going to be inside the zipper in the lining of the bag. This is quilt cotton, and I do have it interfaced with my woven interfacing. Pattern piece H is your zip pocket facing. This will just be used to help you install the zipper and the rest of the pieces of the zipper pocket. Pattern piece I is going to be for the zipper pocket, and pattern piece J is the bottom of the lining. Pattern piece K is going to be for the foam stabilizer. This is going to be what holds the structure of the bag. I am using fusible fleece today instead of foam. And then you should also have a scrap piece of foam or fusible fleece to help you with your magnetic snaps. So let's make the strap first. Grab your 2 quilt cotton pieces and we're gonna lay them right sides together at a 90-degree angle. If you have a directional print, line them up like this first so they're both going in the same direction, and then fold one on top of the other, just like that. That way, whenever we sew this and press this open, it'll all be going in the same direction. So what we want is to draw a straight line from this top left corner all the way to the bottom right corner where the bottom piece is. So what I do is I just pull up this top piece and on the back, make a little mark where that bottom corner is for the piece below it. And then I'll use my small ruler to draw a line from the top corner down to the bottom. Now I'm just going to use a couple clips to hold this in place. I go on the sides and then also down here. Now we can take this to the sewing machine and just quickly sew along this marked line. Once you have that line sewn, you can go ahead and trim down so you can leave about a 1/2 inch or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now we're just going to grab our iron and press the seam open. So I press it open on the front first, just like that. Then I'll flip it over and I'll press the seam behind it open as well. Okay, you can go ahead and put this to the side. So you can see my waterproof canvas side of the strap. I was able to cut this at 60 inches long, so I don't need to attach 2 pieces. If you do have 2 pieces to attach, you can attach them the same way as the quilt cotton side, or you can attach it per the instructions where you just lay them right sides together and do a straight stitch and then open it, top stitch. It's very easy. However, if you have the ability to just cut one long 60-inch strap, that's really the easiest way to go. So now what we want to do is find the midpoint on the back of both of our straps and then fold the long raw edges wrong sides together up to meet that midpoint. For my waterproof canvas, I'll be using a ruler and a marking pen, but then for the quilt cotton, we'll just use the iron. So on the back of my waterproof canvas strip, I'm just measuring 1 inch from one of the raw edges, and then I'm marking a line, and that's just my midpoint line. I'm going to do this for the entire length of the strap. So once you have that midpoint mark, we can just take the raw edges and fold them wrong sides together up to meet that midpoint mark, and then I'm just going to use clips to hold this in place. If you're using vinyl or cork, it's easiest to just use clips. You don't really want to use your iron for that. If you're using quilt cotton, you can just press this with an iron and it's very easy. So once you have the strap clipped on both sides, you can go ahead and set this to the side for just a moment. Now we're going to do the same thing with the quilt cotton strap, but this time we're going to just use the iron. So we're going to fold our strap in half along the long edges, wrong sides together, and then just press along the entire length of your strap. Once you have that center mark pressed, open up your strap again, and now take the raw edges on the long sides and fold them up wrong sides together to meet that center mark, and press along the entire length of the strap. And you're going to do this for both sides. So we're doing the exact same thing here that we did with the other strap, except we're going to use an iron for this one. So once you have both of your strap panels pressed, each should be 1 inch wide. Now what we're going to do is we're just going to line them up wrong sides together, so raw edges of the long sides together, line up the short edges, and then if you already have clips on one of them, just include the other one into those clips and line it up nice and straight. And just do this along the entire length of your strap. You could also use your double-sided tape here to attach these 2 pieces together. So as you can see, I made my fabric strap just a little bit longer than it needed to be. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to trim the fabric portion down so it's the same size as my waterproof canvas. Now before we go to the sewing machine, I want to address these little ends over here. I don't like the raw edges of either one of these showing, so I'm going to open up both and just fold each down anywhere between 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch, and then fold it back. So what I'll do is I'll just fold one side and then line it up with the other side, just like that. And then I can take a marker and just kind of mark on the fabric side where the top of that folded edge is. Move that out of the way. And then just fold down where my marks are, refold, And then when I put them together, they'll end up at the same length, just like that. And that way we just have all of the raw edges tucked in. Nothing is going to be showing. It's a very clean finish. Once you have one end folded in, just repeat that process for the other end. So now we can take our strap to the sewing machine and we're going to sew along the entire 4 edges of the strap at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Decide now which part of the strap is going to be the outer part and which part is going to be the inner part. You're going to want to make sure that your top stitch thread goes on whichever part is your outer part. Okay, to finish the strap, I'm going to be using my rivet press with my dies to create the holes and to set the rivets. I have my rivets right here, and I'll also be attaching my 1-inch swivel hooks and my 1-inch strap slider. So first we're going to attach the strap slider. Decide which side is going to be the back side. So for me, that's going to be this blue waterproof canvas. So I'm going to slide my strap through the bottom with the back side against the middle rail of my slider, just like this. And then I'll slide it over through the other side of my slider. And then I'll pull this down about 1.5 inches, just like that. So I'm just gonna grab a couple clips to hold this together. Now you can take this to your sewing machine and top stitch a little box with an X in it to hold this in place. I like using rivets because it's just easier. So I've got my fabric marking pen and I'm gonna attach 2 rivets. I just eyeball it and just make sure they're centered. And that looks about good. There we go. So I just mark the dots for my rivets. Now I'll insert the hole punch die onto my rivet press, and lining up the tip of the die with my marks, I'm just going to press through both layers of the strap to make the holes. Once I have those holes made, I can just take my rivets and take one of the male ends, push it through the hole, take a female end, and just snap them together. Do this for both of them. Now I'm going to change out my die and insert my 10mm double cap rivet die. And I can just press both of these rivets into place. There we go. Nice and easy. So now take your strap and have it wrong side up. So for me, that's that waterproof canvas. Make sure your strap is completely straight. It's not twisted in any way. Grab one of your hooks and insert it onto the opposite edge, so that the hook side is on the same side as your outer side. So for me, it's the fabric. And just slide the hook down. There we go. So now for me, waterproof canvas sides together, I'm going to take that opposite edge of my strap and then insert it right where the back side, where my rivets are, up through the strap slider. I'm going to give a generous pull on this. And then I'm going to insert it on the other side. Just like that. So now when I pull on my strap, I should have my swivel hook on one side, the slider in the middle, and then nothing on this other side. So last, I'm going to take my other swivel hook, insert the strap into that swivel hook, fold my strap, waterproof canvas sides together, give it about 1.5 inches, clip that just to hold it in place. And just like I did with the slider, I'm going to mark 2 dots that are centered, and this will be where I place my rivets. Once again, you can just take this to the sewing machine and sew a rectangle here if that's easier for you. So I'll show you. I'll use this torture device for a minute. Actually, this is really easy to use. It just looks kind of scary. So I'm just going to slide my strap into the device, and I have one of the hole punches here. I'm not sure what size it is. It's a smaller size. And I'll just press with my hands, and it punches out the hole very easily. So this is a great option if you don't use your rivet press for punching out the holes. This is very easy to use. So now I'll just insert my rivets into those holes, insert the male end, and then snap on the female end. And now all I have to do is press these with my rivet press. And there we go. Now you have your crossbody strap, and it is so cute. I absolutely love this two-tone strap. You can have so much fun with this. Go ahead and put this to the side and let's work on the bag. So now let's build the strap anchors. Grab your 2 D-rings or triangle rings like I have and grab your 2 PC units. Fold them so that they're wrong sides up. Grab a ruler and along the longer edges on the wrong side of your fabric, mark 1 inch up. So we're just marking that midpoint. We're pretty much doing the same thing we did with the strap, just for the strap holders. Now fold the long edges of your strap anchors, wrong sides together up to meet that midpoint mark. And if you're using quilt cotton here, you can press it with an iron. Otherwise, use some clips to hold it together. So do this with both of your strap anchors. And now let's take this to the sewing machine and let's top stitch along these 2 clipped edges on both of our strap anchors at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Once you have these top stitched, grab your D-rings. And with the right side facing up towards the top of the D-ring, slide your strap tab in and fold it wrong sides together so it just wraps around your D-ring. You can add a clip to hold it together. Go ahead and do the same thing with the other D-ring and strap tab. Now we can just really quickly take this to the sewing machine and top stitch along these clipped edges at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now grab a ruler and draw a line from that raw edge in 1/2 of an inch. So I'm just using my fabric marker for that. You're just going to want to have this line for later on in the bag making process. So if this disappears by then, don't worry about it. We can remark it later. So now before we move on, I'm just going to add 1 rivet to each one of these. So once again, I'm just going to center it like that. I'm not measuring it. It's okay if they're not in the exact same spot. So once again, I'll use this hole punch. And then I'll just insert my rivets and snap them in. Grab my rivet press and just press down these rivets. Okay, you can put your strap tabs to the side. Now let's work on that front pocket. So grab both of your piece B's and we're just going to lay them right sides together. Line up all of the edges nicely. And then let's clip together this top curved edge. Now let's take this to the sewing machine and sew along this top clipped edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Once you have that top edge sewn together, go ahead and trim down that inner corner on both sides. And then clip into the seam allowance all around the curved center. This will just help keep that pocket nice and smooth in the end. Now take your panels and flip them wrong sides together. I like to line up that bottom straight edge first and add some clips to that bottom straight edge, and then I'll press and line up that top curved edge. So now I'm just going to use my fingers to help push out that corner on the inner portion of the top edge and just really push down the seam. If you have to slide your hand inside of the panels, go ahead and do that. There we go. Now I'm going to grab my iron, and from the exterior side, since I'm using quilt cotton, I can just press this down to get it as flat as possible. If you can't press this with an iron, just use some clips and finger press this seam really well. So now let's take this to the sewing machine and top stitch along this curved edge at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So once you have your pocket top stitch, you can set that to the side for just a moment. So now grab both of your top panels for the exterior and both of the piece A's. So one is an exterior cut and one is a lining cut. And let's just attach the top panels to both of these since it's the same step. So line up your top panel on the top edge of your piece A and then fold it down so that they're right sides together, and then clip them together along that top edge. Repeat this for the other panels as well. Now let's take these to the sewing machine and sew along these top clipped edges at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Okay, so now you want to press that top seam up and away from the bottom seams. Since I'm using vinyl up here, I'm not going to press it with an iron. On the back, what we want to do is open that seam and press it open. Again, since I'm using vinyl, I'm not going to press it with an iron. If you're using quilt cotton here, you can definitely just press this with an iron. I'm just going to finger press this. And then we're going to take these to the sewing machine and we're going to top stitch along these seams. we're going to top stitch on both sides at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, making sure we catch the associated seam allowance with it. So when I'm top stitching on the vinyl side, I'm catching the back of the vinyl. And when I'm top stitching on the quilt cotton, I'm catching the other side. I'll just be manipulating this at the sewing machine and checking with my finger to make sure that this is smoothed out. So I pretty much just rub my thumb underneath it while it's sewing and smooth it out as it goes. Do this for both of your panels. So now grab the exterior panel that has the lining on the bottom in your front pocket. If you want to add a magnetic snap here, you definitely can. So she adds this beautiful little magnetic snap that goes over the top edge. In previous bags, I have added just a plain magnetic snap by adding it to the lining panel about 1 inch down from the top seam and then attaching the opposite edge appropriately on the bottom panel here. I'm not going to be adding a snap today because personally I don't really need it, but there are a lot of closure options here if you wanted to do that. So line up the vertical edges and the bottom edge so that it's all perfectly squared up. And then I'm just going to use clips to hold it all together. And now we can baste along the sides and the bottom at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So now before we move on to the next step, I'm actually going to attach my bag label. So what I'm going to do is find the midpoint of this top edge. So what I do is I just fold it in half, lining up the side edges, pinch the middle, grab some scissors and just clip right along that corner. And now I have my midpoint mark made. So I measured down 2.5 inches from that midpoint mark and marked a little dot with my fabric marker. Now I'll take my washer and center my washer over that dot. Try to make sure it's as straight as possible with this seam down here. And then I'll just mark in that washer the lines for my bag tag. Using my seam ripper, I'm just going to rip along those marked lines. And I'm actually going to rip the line a little bit shorter than what I marked because I would like this to be tight. You don't want it to be too loose. Here we go. Now I'm going to grab a piece of fusible fleece, just a scrap piece, and I'm going to mark those same lines using my washer on my scrap piece, and I'll rip those as well. This is just going to provide a little bit more support for my bag tag. So now I have my metal label with the prongs sticking out. I'll just insert those prongs into the marked spots and push through. I'll then take my scrap of fusible fleece and push the prongs through those slits as well. Can trim this down. Once I have my prongs inserted through the bag and the fusible fleece, I'll then just grab my washer and insert the prongs through the washer as well. Push down nice and firm and then set your prongs. There we go. So now when I flip this over, I can see it's nice and straight. If I wasn't going to be adding foam or fusible fleece to the back of this, I would definitely take another scrap piece of my fusible fleece and add that over this just to make sure this metal doesn't rub against the lining. But since I know we're going to be covering this entire back with more interfacing, I can leave this for now. So now with this front pocket panel and one of your strap tabs, measure in from the top right 1 3/4 of an inch. And then line up your strap tab so that that 1/2 inch mark is running along the top edge of your exterior panel. So you have a 1/2 of an inch overhang with your strap, and then just clip that in place. Since I'm here, I'm going to put that to the side and I'm going to grab my back panel, and with the other strap tab, I'm going to do the same thing. Going in 1 3/4 of an inch from the top right side, same side, and then let it overhang about 1/2 of an inch, and then just add a couple clips to hold that in place. So now let's take both of these panels to the sewing machine and just baste down these strap tabs. So now grab your foam unit. So I'm using fusible fleece, and we're going to attach this to the back of these panels. If you're using sew and foam, you're just going to lay your foam over the back of your panel, lining up all 4 edges, and then go to the sewing machine and baste this down at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Since I'm using quilt cotton for part of the exterior of my panel, I can try to fuse this on with the iron. So I'm just gonna lie the rough, gluey side of the fusible fleece up, and then right side up my exterior panel. Line up all 4 edges. And then with some steam, I'm just gonna iron on the quilt cotton side, not on the vinyl side. So that secured the fusible fleece to the quilt cotton, but I still have to do it for the vinyl side. So for that, I'm just gonna use some glue. I could also just take this to the sewing machine and base stitch this on. So I just put a generous amount of glue and I'll just push this down. There we go. And that should hold the fusible fleece in place just fine. If you are using foam and basting it down to the sewing machine, use the largest base setting you can. 5 millimeters, 6 millimeters, because you will be ripping that later and cutting down that foam. I'm using fusible fleece and I don't plan to cut out the fusible fleece from the seam later, but with foam you definitely want to so those seams don't get too big. So now I'm gonna try this with the panel that has that front pocket. I'm not sure it'll fuse because I have this pocket right here and I have that waterproof canvas in there, but we can give it a try. All right, so let's see if that fused it at all. Not really. Nope, not at all. Okay. So I'm just gonna use glue for all of this because that did not fuse at all. That waterproof canvas I think really blocks it, so that's fine. Like I said, I could also just base this at the sewing machine, but I do like the fusible fleece to be pretty stuck to the fabric. I don't really like the feel of it shifting around. All right, there we go. I just glued it in place and that should be fine. So now grab your exterior panel that has that slip pocket and we're gonna add a couple rivets right here in the corner. You could just leave this off entirely. You don't have to add these rivets. This just adds a nice little detail and it provides a little bit more structure for this pocket. You could also just top stitch along these top stitch edges up to that corner and then just back stitch well there and leave this unsewn. So she suggests going 1 3/4 of an inch from the sides, which is pretty much right where that corner is, and then 1/2 inch down. So I'll just mark that with my fabric pen. I'm gonna do the same thing on the other side. So now I'm gonna grab my hole punch and I'm gonna hole punch through the pocket and the exterior panel, so all of it. I'm gonna insert it all as best I can. I might have to smush it a little bit to get in there. There we go, just punch that hole. I'm gonna do the same thing on the other side. I'm then just gonna add my rivets and snap them into place. And now I'll grab my rivet press and then I'll just set these rivets. And there we go. Now we have these nice little rivets here that help keep the pocket nice and together so it's not all loosey-goosey and crazy. So as you can see, we did the back panel while we were making the front panel, so we are done with our outer panels. They are good to go. You can put your front and back panels to the side. Now grab your exterior bottom panel, this piece D. Grab the exterior piece and the foam or fusible fleece piece. And again, since I'm using vinyl, I'm not gonna press this. So for this one, I'm actually just gonna add some glue and I'm going to baste it at the machine. So as you can see, I just add the glue to the center because I don't really wanna get the glue on my needle at the sewing machine. And then with the glue side, rough side down against the back of my bottom exterior piece, just going to attach them like that. So now I'll take this to the sewing machine and I'll just baste along all of the edges at 1/8 inch seam allowance. Okay, once you have that basted on, go ahead and put it to the side. Now grab both of your exterior panels and lay them right sides together. So when we do that, you should see that the strap tabs are on opposite sides. Line up all 4 edges. I especially like to make sure I'm lining up these side seams since they're right up against each other. So I'll line up the side seams first, clip in place. Do the same on the other side. And then I'll add clips to the remainder of the 2 vertical sides. Okay, so now let's sew along both these clipped edges at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. If you're using foam or you're using thicker fabric especially, do a second row of stitching right on the outside towards the edge of the fabric, right along the first row of stitching. That'll just help reinforce it so you don't see any of the threads from the stitches on the outside of the bag later. So at this point, if you did use foam, you're going to want to rip out the basting stitches that are on the 1/8 of an inch seam right along the edges and cut down your foam just to make sure that the seams don't get too crazy bulky. Since I'm using fusible fleece, I'm actually okay just leaving it. So now let's take our exterior panel and looking at the bottom edges, fold your outer edges right sides together, lining up those side seams. And then when you do that, you're going to find the midpoint mark on the center of both of your outer panels. Use a marker or scissors, whatever you need to mark that. Do it on the other side as well. Now grab the bottom exterior panel and fold it to find the midpoint marks along the long edges, and then fold it again to find the midpoint marks along the short edges. So first what we're going to do is line up one of the long edges on the base with the long edge on the bottom of your exterior. So I'm just going to fold my exterior up. These fabrics should be right sides together. Match up that midpoint, clip it together in the center first, and then clip out towards the ends of the bottom panel. And you should see that your bottom panel doesn't reach all the way to the corner on your outer panel. It's supposed to be like that. Once you have that clipped in place, let's take this to the sewing machine and sew along this clipped edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Make sure you backstitch well at the beginning and the end. It's easiest to sew this with the wrong side of the bottom up. Okay, once you have one side sewn, we're going to do the same thing on the other long side. So pull up that bottom panel. And once again, let's find the midpoints and line them up. Clip at the middle first, and then clip out towards the sides. And once again, let's go sew along this clipped edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Make sure you backstitch at the beginning and the end. Okay, so once you have both of the long edges sewn in place, what we're going to do is grab our scissors and we're going to cut on the outer panel just down along this vertical short edge, just about 3/8 of an inch down, just like that. So use the bottom panel corners as your guide. Do this on both sides. Now pull at the edges here and line up the side seam with that midpoint mark on your bottom panel. If you were able to press open this seam, that helps quite a bit. I have a little bit too much bulk to do that, but that's okay. It will be fine. So clip this entire edge in place. And by clipping that corner, it should make it a little bit easier to get this to lay flat. Let's go ahead and do the same thing on the other side. Okay, now let's sew along both of these short edges at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Once again, if you want to go around any of these stitches a second time just to really reinforce it, feel free to do that. So if you use foam here, make sure you open up the basting stitches, cut down the foam just to reduce the bulk. But now your exterior is pretty much built. You can take this and put it to the side. So now grab one of your lining pieces in your pocket facing. And let's just find the midpoint along the top edge of our lining piece. And then I'm going to find the midpoint along one of the long edges of my pocket facing as well. So in the pattern, she gives you a diagram to draw out on the back of your pocket facing. Go ahead and do that. So you're going to measure 2 1/4 inches down from that top midpoint mark and then line up your pocket facing so that it's centered and that it's level. Normally I would use pins here and pin the facing to the lining, but because I'm using waterproof canvas, if I put those holes in there now, they won't come out later. So I'm just using some masking tape here to hold it in place. Now we're going to take this to the sewing machine and we're going to sew along this internal rectangle. It's 3/8 of an inch high all the way around just to hold the pocket facing to the lining. Once you have that stitched down, grab a seam ripper and start ripping along the center of that center line on the back of your pocket facing. So you're ripping through the pocket facing and the lining panel. Once you get that started, you can then grab some scissors and cut along that middle line until you get to the tip of that triangle that you marked. Once you get to the tip of that triangle, follow the diagonals all the way to the corner of your stitching. You want to get so close to the thread that you almost cut it, but you don't cut it. Do this for all 4 corners. You know, I always forget how hard it is to do these pockets with this waterproof canvas, but we're gonna power through. So let's push this facing through that hole so that the facing and the lining are wrong sides together. If you're using quill cotton here, after you get this pushed through, you can very easily press along these edges to create a nice rectangle hole here. But since we have waterproof canvas, it's a little bit more challenging. So I'm gonna use clips to hold down the seam until I can figure out something else to do. Okay, so you see I use clips here to hold this down, but that's not gonna be super helpful. So I think we're gonna have to use some tape to keep this all in place. So what I'm gonna do is just unclip one of my long edges and let it lift up a bit. Grab some tape, and I'm just gonna tape right along the seam, like right along the stitching on the back, just like that, and then cut my tape down. So I'm gonna use that tape, but then I'm also gonna add some masking tape here just to help. You know, it doesn't hurt. There we go. So once again, on the other side, I'm gonna lift up that long edge, and then I'm just going to apply some double-sided tape right along the edge of the seam, and then I'll just press down that long edge so that the double-sided tape will help hold it down. Then I'm also going to use some masking tape here just to help. So I'm going to add masking tape to the edges of the long side, and I'll also add masking tape to the short edges as well. There we go. This is not a permanent fix. We just need it to stay down for a moment while we attach the zipper. So go ahead and put this to the side while we build the pocket. So now we're going to work on our card slot pockets. In the pattern, she gives you the exact measurements to mark all the lines on your card slot pocket. Make sure you also mark the top. So on the first line from the top, we're going to fold our fabric right sides together. And when I fold along that line, I'm also making sure these shorter edges are lined up appropriately. And then I'll just grab my iron and press along that edge. So on the next line, we're gonna fold the fabric wrong sides together. Again, making sure my side edges are lined up, not all wonky. Go ahead and press that fold. The third line will be right sides together. The fourth line will be wrong sides together. The next line is right sides together. And then the last line will be wrong sides together. Now what I'm going to do real quick before we move on is I'm going to top stitch along each of our folds. So we have 3 folds. I'm going to open up the pocket so I'm only top stitching on the fold, and I'm going to do this for each of the 3 folds. This will just help it hold the shape really nicely. So now take your card slots and flip it over so it's right side down. And we're going to fold up this bottom edge by 1/4 of an inch. This will just help close the lining in the end when we're done with the bag. So I just fold it up 1/4 of an inch and press with my iron. Now you can go to the top of your card slot pocket and fold it to find the center and mark that center. Now let's quickly take this to the sewing machine and just baste down the edges at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So now using this midpoint line up here, use a ruler and mark 1/8 of an inch to the left of that center. So I have my 1/8 of an inch tick mark on the center, and I'm just going to go along the side of my ruler so that I am 1/8 of an inch away on the left side. So now here's what we're going to do. We're going to start at the bottom, and we're going to sew just on the left side of that marked line all the way to the top, and then we're going to go over to the right side of the marked line and sew all the way down on the right side of the marked line. We're pretty much just making 2 parallel lines that are going to hug the side of this line. That'll help reinforce the seam holding these pockets in place. Okay, so now we have these center-ish lines marked. We don't want it to be exactly center because in the pattern she says that with the zipper it makes it easier for you to access these if it's just a bit off center. So now from that center line that you marked with your pen, measure out 2.5 inches on each side and mark vertical lines. Now we're just going to sew from the bottom up on both of these marked lines. Alright, so now you have your card slot pockets all ready to go. You can grab one of your cards and just check it out. That fits perfectly and it's adorable. So now grab your zipper, and I am going to mark the midpoint of my zipper just to make this a little bit easier when attaching everything. So I'm just going to use my scissors once again to cut a little corner off of the middle. There we go. Now your zipper should be longer than the top edge of your pocket. So take your card slots and lay them right side up. Grab your zipper and lay it right side up. And when the zipper is closed, the zipper pull should be on the left. Match up those midpoint marks and clip together, and then clip the zipper to the entire top edge of your card slot pocket. Now I'm going to base this on at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So now grab your zipper pocket lining, and if you're using quilt cotton, go ahead and press that bottom edge wrong sides together 1/4 of an inch, again just to help finish it in the end. Since I'm using waterproof canvas, that's not really going to do me any good. So take that lining pocket piece and let's find the midpoint on that top edge, and then lay your lining piece right side up. Grab your card slot pocket piece and lay it right side down, and then flip up your zipper tape so that you have the raw unsewn edge facing towards the top and the zipper is right side up. So let's line up the midpoint of our zipper with the midpoint on that lining piece. Clip those together and then clip along the entire edge. So now I'm going to go based along this clipped edge at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So you know what, I just realized the pattern actually has you sew these 2 lining panels onto your zipper at 1/4 inch seam allowance, and we're going to actually want to do that for this next step. So that's okay if you make the mistake that I do. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and I'm just going to stitch along both of my edges of my zipper and just change the seam allowance to 1/4 of an inch. So now take your lining and press it away from the zipper. Go ahead and flip it so that it is the zipper right side up and the lining is wrong side up. And just press this zipper as flat as you can get it. Now line up your zipper unit so that the back of the card slots is up and the back of the lining panel is down and the right side of your zipper is face up. Zipper when closed goes to the left. Grab your lining panel that has that hole and center it over your zipper. Now this can be a little challenging, especially if you're using waterproof canvas, but do your best to get it all lined up and centered. So what we can do here is we can add some more double-sided tape to our zipper tape this time. So grab your double-sided tape and apply it to the very edge of both of the long sides of your zipper tape, all the way down, just like that. And then I just work on one side at a time, so I'm going to remove the paper from the bottom edge. So this way only the tape is left on the zipper tape. And then I'll take my lining panel and line it up and center it on my zipper tape. Now this is not a very challenging thing at all to do if you're using quilt cotton. However, waterproof canvas is a little bit more fickle. All right, so then I pull the zipper pull all the way to the side, just like that. There we go. Press it really well. So now let's remove the paper from the zipper tape on the other side and then push down the top edge of our opening. There we go. So I have it as centered as I'm happy with. Now let's take this to the sewing machine and let's top stitch along the lining panel all around this rectangle at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, we did it. It was a bit of a wrestle, but we did it. Waterproof canvas will not beat me. Don't worry about these wrinkles. It's the lining, guys. It doesn't have to be perfect. Okay, if your zipper tape extends farther than that zipper facing, go ahead and trim it down. If you have any extra tape anywhere, you can go ahead and remove that. So now take your lining panel and lay it right side down. Grab that top card fold pocket and fold it down so that it's right side to that back pocket for your lining. And you can see the lining pocket down here is quite a bit longer. That's fine. I'm just gonna fold this bottom panel wrong sides together so it ends up the same length as my card slot panel. And then I'll just clip along that edge. We want this to be nice and even. So now you can go ahead and clip the sides as well. And now we're going to sew along these two sides at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. We're not going to sew along the bottom. When we're sewing, we're going to sew it at the sewing machine with the lining right side up, and then we're going to fold the lining out of the way and then sew down the edges just like that. Okay, so now your pocket should be all ready to go. If you open up the zipper, you see your little card slot pockets back there. It has an opening on the bottom. You backstitch really well right here because we will be pulling on that a lot to turn the whole bag right side out. I like to just open my zipper and leave it open for the rest of this so I don't have to think about it later. So now we're gonna add the magnetic snaps to the top of our lining pieces. So you might already have the midpoint marked on one of the top edges of your lining panels. If not, go ahead and mark the midpoint on both top edges of your lining panels. Measure down 1.5 inches from those top midpoint marks and mark a little dot. So like I said, I'm using these magnetic snaps from Can Snaps, and the neat thing about these is that one side is the magnetic snap as normal, but then the back is actually a little cap like this. So this is perfect for a project if the back of the snap was going to be seen. Now on this, it's not going to be. You could use this magnetic snaps with the prongs, but these magnetic snaps are actually very thin, which I really like. A lot of times they're very thick. So since we have it, let's play with it. These are the 18mm size snaps, and then you'll have 2 base dies, one for the male and one for the female end, and then 1 upper die for the cap. So first I'm going to grab my hole punch, and I am going to punch out a hole right where I marked my dot. So I have the holes punched. I'm also going to grab a couple scrap pieces of my fusible fleece just to beef this up a little bit, and I'll just punch holes in each of these pieces as well. Okay, so I'm going to take the female magnetic snap and insert that through the hole that I just punched, flip my lining panel with the pocket over, and then I'll just take one of my scrap pieces of fusible fleece and insert that over it, grab a cap, and snap the cap on just like that. I'm going to do the same thing with the other lining panel, but this time I have the male end of the snap. Push that in, grab my fusible fleece, insert that over, and snap it down. Now I'm going to grab my rivet press and I'm going to insert my dies. Now both the male and the female end will have the same upper die. This is the part with the screw, so you only have to screw it in once, which is very convenient. So I'm going to be doing the female end first. So I'm going to find the base die that looks like the male end, and I'm going to insert that into my rivet press. And then I'll take my magnetic snap, and with the female side down, I'm just going to wedge it in there and then press the magnetic snap into place. There we go. Isn't that neat? So if you ever need a magnetic snap on something and you won't be able to hide the back, this is a really cool way to do that. Okay, so now for the male end, I'm just going to remove this base piece that was used for pressing the female end, and I'm going to grab the other base piece, and this is going to be used for pressing the male end. Just plop that in there, lay it so that the male side is down, and then just press. That is just the coolest thing ever. I love that. I love when we can make things easier. I mean, magnetic snaps are not a hard thing to do normally, but this is fun, and now I need to find a pattern that will allow me to utilize the caps on this. All right, now let's quickly find the centers on the bottom of each of our lining panels. So I'm just going to fold it in half and then cut. Let's do the same on the other lining panel. Now take your 2 lining panels and lay them right sides together. If it makes it easier, just use the magnetic snaps to combine them, and then line up all of the edges. Grab some clips, and we're going to clip along the 2 side edges. So now we're going to sew along these 2 clipped edges at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. I know some of you are going to ask why we don't increase the seam allowance on the lining this time. If you look at the shape of this pattern piece, it's already done for you. See how up here it's going to be the same width as our exterior piece, but then it goes down tighter. So that makes the lining a little bit smaller so you don't have any bagginess in your lining. This means we don't have to adjust the seam allowance at all. We'll just do 3/8 of an inch all the way down. Make sure you backstitch at the beginning and the end. along this little curved notch here, go ahead and clip into the seam allowance about halfway or a little bit more than halfway, just to make sure this lies nice and smooth inside the bag. Do this to both sides. Now grab your lining base piece and let's mark the midpoints along all 4 edges. So I'm just going to fold it in half to find the midpoints on the long edges. Once again, I'm just gonna clip this with my scissors. Okay, so we're gonna attach this just like we did on the exterior. So grab your lining unit and open it up so that you can insert your base unit, right sides together, and match up those midpoint marks along one of the long edges. Grab your clips and clip the middle first, and then clip out along the entire edge. Now let's take this to the sewing machine and sew along this clipped edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. So once you have one long edge sewn in place, go ahead and repeat this with the other edge. Now I know this second long edge can be a little tricky to sew because you don't have as much wiggle room at the sewing machine, but just do your best. You know what, I'm gonna go ahead and clip the already sewn edge down along the side, because we're gonna do that in just a moment anyways, and see if that helps give us a little bit more room over here when sewing at the sewing machine. So now let's sew along this clipped edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Okay, once you have that second long edge sewn on, what we want to do is just clip along this edge. So you see we have that little box corner on the base unit. We're going to clip the lining panel right along this little corner. So it's about a 3/8 of an inch clip. It just helps us sew on the sides. So you're not clipping any of the stitching, you're just clipping the lining panel. So then pull the lining panel away from one another and then line up the seam along the 2 lining panels with the midpoint mark on your base lining panel. So it's easier here if you just spread open the seam allowance and get it all centered and lined up, and then add a clip to hold it all together, and then just clip the entire edge. Let's go ahead and do the same thing on the other side. There we go. Now we can take this to the sewing machine and sew along both clipped edges at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. All right, now your lining is all done. So now turn your lining so that it's right side out. Make sure your zipper pocket is open. Grab your exterior and make sure it's wrong side out. Okay, so now insert your lining panel into your exterior panel, and the side of your lining panel with the zipper should be against the back of your outer panel, so the side that doesn't have a pocket. So pockets are not right sides together. Make sure your D-ring and the straps are in between the lining and the exterior panels. And then first, you can line up the side seams, and you can finger press these open if you'd like. It'll make it a little bit easier to sew at the machine if you do that. These can get bulky, so be careful. So I'm lining up the 2 side seams first and clipping those in place. And then if you have any midpoint marks along the top edges of your lining and outer panel, you can clip those together. I don't have the midpoint mark on the back, that's fine. And then just clip the top edges of the lining and the exterior panels together all the way around. So now we're going to sew along the entire top edge of this bag at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. I know that when I put my rivets into my little strap tabs here, I didn't put them in as close to the D-ring as I would have liked. So I'm going to feel for them. And actually I can feel them through this. So I'm just going to mark where that edge is. I don't want my needle to go over the metal on those rivets. So I'm going to use a zipper foot so I can get close to those but without touching them. You might want to increase the size of your needle here. I will tell you on a previous bag I did have some needles break using the 80-12, so if you want to increase it to the 90-14. In the pattern she actually suggests going to 110/18. If you need to, if you're having trouble, if you're having needle breaks, just increase the size of your needle. Get a stronger needle for this. Go slow. I'll be sewing from the inside of the bag all the way around just like this. So I'm sewing from the back of my lining with that side up. So if you're using foam, go ahead and trim out the foam from the seam allowance. So at the sewing machine, you can see at some point I increased my seam allowance to about 1/2 inch. Since I'm using waterproof canvas and vinyl, I can't really unpick this and redo it. I'm kind of just stuck with that. So we're just going to assume it's going to turn out fine. So now we need to pull the bag through the opening in our lining pocket. So just reach in and pull it all out through that pocket. So now what I'm actually going to do, after I got that exterior pulled out, I'm actually pulling it back into the lining panel. So not through the pocket, but down here into the bottom of the lining panel. Because when I top stitch this, I want to top stitch it with the exterior in the center. It's going to be easier for me to do that. So I'm just going to tug it down in there just like that. And I'm actually going to top stitch it first, and then I'll close the hole in the lining. So I stick my hand in through the pocket up to that seam between the exterior and the lining and just roll the seam to get it nice and straight and add some clips. I'm going to do this around the entire top edge, again with my lining right side out and the exterior on the inside. Okay, so once you have that top edge completely clipped, you can see it gets pretty bulky. This is where I run into problems, right here. These side seams, especially with the vinyl on top, it's so bulky, and even though I try to flatten it out as best I can, it's not totally flat. So I think I am going to actually increase my needle size to a 90 by 14 just to help with those side seams. So I'm going to take this to the sewing machine and I'm going to top stitch on the interior of the bag. So I'm going to go around the top just like this, and I'm top stitching on that exterior piece. Bag is lining side out. I'm going to top stitch at an 1/8 inch seam allowance. I'm going to go very, very slow and just hope for the best. Alright, we got a top stitch. You know, I don't know how many times I have top stitched bags like that. It's just always hard for me. So I am now going to pull the bag so that the lining is on the inside and the exterior is on the outside. Alright, even though it was a bit of a struggle, it's actually turning out really, really cute, isn't it? I just love the shape of this bag. I love the structure of the panels and that little slip pocket. It's such a cute bag. All right, so now let's close the lining and then we are done. So just pull along the edges of the lining, and they should already be folded down, so you shouldn't have to press them or anything. Just grab some clips and clip along that edge. And now let's sew along this clipped edge at an 1/8 inch seam allowance. Once you have it top stitched down, just push that pocket back into the zipper. And there we go, the bag is done. All we have to do is add the strap. Let's take a look at the bag. Oh, it's so pretty. Even with my kind of wonky top stitching, even with my struggles with the seams, it still turns out so stinking cute. Okay, we gotta add the strap. I gotta be honest, I think the strap might be my favorite thing ever. I love this two-tone strap. And look at that. Look at how adorable this bag is. I love the shape. You know what? We use that fusible fleece. I would highly recommend it. I would definitely recommend the fusible fleece. I feel like the fusible fleece is a little bit easier to work with than foam, especially on domestic machines. And the structure is just perfect. So let's look at this compared to one with foam. So this one has the fusible fleece, this one has the foam. The foam one, it is more cushiony, it is more pillowy. Honestly, it's more snuggly, but the fusible fleece one is just as good. It holds its shape. We don't have to worry about it flopping all over the place or anything like that. I just love this bag. And honestly, you know what? The waterproof canvas lining might have something to do with why it's holding its shape so well. When you use waterproof canvas in your lining, it does hold it together really well. It's like another layer of interfacing, like a firmer interfacing, without actually having to apply the interfacing. So let's real quick take a look at this bag on. Got my tiny step stool here. I wear it as a crossbody. And there we go. Dang, this bag is cute. Look at those colors. This is a really, really cute bag. Oh my goodness. So I hope that this tutorial inspires you to go out and make a Teloujay crossbody bag. Thank you so much to Country Cow Designs for allowing me to film a tutorial for this. This is so stinking cute. Such a fun bag to make. I can't wait to see your version of this bag. If you've already made one, leave a comment down below and let me know how you liked it. I want to see some photos too. So if you're over on social media, either on Facebook or Instagram, go ahead and tag me. I'm OklaRoots on both of those platforms, and I want to see your version of this bag. I have heard that some people are adding a recessed zip panel to the top, so you have a zipper instead of the magnetic clasps. I think that would be a really cool adjustment to this pattern, but honestly, it's just perfect. It's just so cute. I love it. And you know what? I think leaving off the magnetic snap here is totally fine. I don't think it's a necessary closure for this type of bag. Definitely add it if you feel more comfortable doing so, but don't feel like you have to. So thanks for sewing with me today. I hope you have a great day. I hope you have a fantastic rest of the week. Get out there and make something. Bye.